My dad said, "Call your grandpa while I lay in ICU." I called a lawyer instead, and filed a $65,000 lawsuit that made them finally listen. When I was dying, they chose dinner at Rachel's. 60 days later, I evicted them from the $300,000 home I bought with my own hands. Now, I will tell how all of this began. I am 34 years old. My wife Lily and I live in an apartment in Manhattan, New York, roughly 15 minutes by metro from the financial sector. I work as a senior financial analyst for a well-known investment firm. Looking back, I've always felt fortunate. At the age of 18, I was offered a full scholarship to a top institution. 4 years later, I graduated right as the stock market was soaring. By the age of 26, I'd saved enough money for my own apartment. At 30, I was promoted to a management position. From the outside, my life appeared to be very solid. And to be fair, that was mostly true. I had a family, albeit not perfect, and a location to return to during holidays like Christmas and Thanksgiving, as well as the rare weekend gathering. However, everything began to change once something happened. I was involved in a very unexpected accident. Strangely, that accident led me to Lily, who is now my wife. But it also provided me the insight to finally understand the reality, as well as the strength to cut off all links with Richard, Diane and Rachel, whom I used to refer to as Dad, Mom, and younger sister. I'd just finished a meeting with the board of directors and was heading back to my Manhattan apartment. I was traveling along FDR Drive when a truck in the opposite way lost control and swerved directly into my lane. I could only yank the steering wheel to the right to escape a direct collision. The impact sounded as if someone had dropped a large steel block from a skyscraper on the pavement. Even though the airbags deployed in time, my head crashed hard on the side frame, and I could feel blood streaming from my forehead to my cheek. My eyesight blurred, and I heard a loud ringing in my ears. But I was still awake. The EMTs promptly stabilized my neck with a hard collar before loading me onto a stretcher. During the journey to the hospital, a young nurse kept checking on me, asking questions like, "Do you know what day it is? Can you tell me where you are? What's your full name?" I could answer all of them, but I had to pause and consider a couple. My head felt like someone had placed a big stone on it, and everything around me moved slowly, as if it were all covered in thick fog. When we arrived at Mount Si Hospital, I was evaluated by Dr. Peterson, an elderly guy with gray-streaked hair, a soothing voice, and a steady presence. Following a preliminary neurological examination, he requested a CT scan. He returned with the results in hand and remarked in a serious tone, "You've sustained a mild concussion, and your right shoulder is severely dislocated. If we don't operate right away, there's a risk of permanent nerve damage." I nodded, letting him know I was still awake and understood what he said. A few seconds later, he said, "Because of the head trauma, your ability to make decisions is currently impaired. According to medical protocol, we must assess your capacity to give informed consent before administering general anesthesia." The words that followed hit me hard. I had always taken pride in being in charge of situations, but this time I couldn't do anything. To assist me grasp the situation, Dr. Peterson spoke carefully and emphasized that I was not legally able to sign the operation consent form on my own. I'd have to contact my next of kin to get their okay for the treatment. At that point, with my thoughts still cloudy and my shoulder aching in pain, I realized I had no choice. As much as I didn't want to, I had to pick up the phone and call the individuals I still considered family. Following the doctor's instruction, the first individuals to come to mind were my parents, Richard and Diane. My head was throbbing in harsh waves, and my eyesight was going in and out, but I was still awake enough to remember my phone password. I looked to the nurse standing behind me and asked, "My phone password is 0102. Could you call my parents for me?" Lily nodded and swiftly opened the phone with the code I provided her. A few minutes later, she turned to me and said, "I called the contacts saved as your dad and mom, but no one answered." Hearing that, I attempted to rise up, but pain surged through my right shoulder like a knife, forcing me to lie back down quickly. I was unable to move, so Lily volunteered to send them a note instead. She assisted me in typing a basic text message to my father. "I was involved in an accident. I'm in Mount Sinai Hospital. Can you come and help me?" Less than 2 minutes later, my phone rang. Lily took it up with hope. They responded, but after reading it, her tone softened. They said they're going to Rachel's place for dinner. Hearing that message repeated to me, I couldn't say anything. My thoughts felt full of cotton, and a strange, heavy emptiness settled in my chest. When Lily saw I was still silent and unmoving, she offered to send them another message. I nodded. She texted another text on my behalf. "Dad, I need surgery. The hospital requires consent from a family member." The following 5 minutes were completely silent. All I could hear was the heart monitor's constant beep and the odd footsteps echoing down the hall. The phone suddenly buzzed again, indicating a fresh message. Lily examined it right away. After a startled silence, she mumbled, "Oh my God." The way her voice sank made me realize something was wrong. I asked her what it stated. She paused before reading it aloud. "Can't this wait? We're busy right now. If it's urgent, call your grandfather." Lily gazed at me with sadness in her eyes. As for me, something erupted inside. A burst of rage erupted in my chest, like dry wood on fire. My skull throbbed. My heart was pounding so hard that I thought it was going to explode. The rage, along with the head injuries, completely overpowered me. My vision decreased. My ears are ringing. And it felt as if someone was squeezing the air from my lungs. Then everything became black. I can't remember what happened after that. All I know is that when I opened my eyes again, the first sound I heard was a familiar voice shouting my name. "Noah, can you hear me?" And that voice belonged to my grandfather, Henry. My grandfather arrived and signed the consent document for me, and I was soon brought into surgery. The operation proceeded smoothly. When I awoke in the recovery area, the first thing I noticed was my grandfather. He'd been sitting alongside me the entire time, holding a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. When he saw me open my eyes, he smiled and said, "Everything is fine now, Noah." The doctor stated, "You're doing well." Hearing his remarks, I gave him a faint nod and thanked him. My shoulder had been neatly bandaged and the medications had helped to relieve the pounding in my brain. What offered me the most comfort was not the successful surgery, but knowing that someone cared enough to be present. After asking a few questions regarding my emotions, my grandfather fell silent. He glanced out the window for a moment, as if absorbed in something profound. His eyes were filled with silent sadness, as if he was revisiting events he had tried to forget. A few minutes later, he returned to me, his voice quiet and calm. He said, "Noah, not everyone who shares your blood is truly family." When he said it, something inside me broke. But at the same time, it felt as if he had finally stated the truth that I had been carrying about for years, but had never dared to say aloud. Those comments broke apart the final strands that had held me to the idea of a loving family, gently but completely. I remained in the hospital for 4 more days before being discharged. During that time, my grandfather cared for me. My parents did not receive a single message or phone contact. Nobody showed up at the hospital room door. The phone remained silent, as if there was nothing more to speak between us. Lily was the day shift nurse assigned to my room. At first, I just paid attention to her since she assisted me in contacting my family after I was admitted. But over time, I realized Lily was doing far more than just her job. Every time she came in to check on me, she'd stay for a few additional minutes to ask how I was doing. Not the typical clinical questions, but ones like, "How are you feeling today?" Or, "Is there anything else you need?" Her eyes were usually full of real warmth. The way Lily looked at me stood out the most, in contrast to the aloof professionalism of other medical professionals. There was neither pity or disdain in her gaze. Instead, it was the sight of someone who genuinely cared, someone who saw that the agony sprang not only from physical traumas, but also from family silence and apathy. Lily offered to help when she saw how fatigued my grandfather looked after sitting by my side all day. She regularly stopped by after her shifts ended, bringing snacks for my grandfather, or simply sitting with him to keep him company. She would softly tell him, "Don't worry, I'll watch Noah for a while. Why don't you go down to the cafeteria and get some rest?" Every time she said that, something inside of me softened. While laying in that hospital bed, I opened the message my father had sent me and handed over the phone to my grandfather. He read it, then simply shook his head. He didn't say anything, but his eyes conveyed a deep, quiet disappointment. A few minutes later, he spoke quietly. "I called your parents. I even called Rachel. I thought maybe they didn't realize how serious this was." When he stated that, I felt both surprised and disappointed. He had reached out to them, but they never responded. After a moment, he added more quietly, "But after I explained everything, they just said, 'He's got doctors,' and hung up. No one asked how much pain you were in. No one asked what room you were in." Hearing that, I was unable to answer. I only nodded slightly. My throat clenched from emotion. And then, possibly to boost my spirits or encourage me forward, he handed me a small piece of paper with a phone number scrawled on it. With a cheeky twinkle in his eye, he stated, "This is Lily's number. It took me a bit of effort to get it. You owe her dinner." I gazed at him, shocked, but something warm inside me stirred. Perhaps he had seen something I hadn't yet admitted to myself. and I had no notion she would one day be my wife. My grandfather slept comfortably that night, but I remained awake, lost in old recollections. Rachel was 2 years younger than me, but my parents treated us both equally. Everything was fair, including birthdays, Christmas gifts, and toys. No one ever received more than the other. My mother would say, "You're the older brother, but you're still my child, just like your sister." But everything changed when I was 8 and Rachel became 6. She soon had a high temperature and was transported to the hospital. Following a battery of tests, physicians diagnosed her with meningitis. It felt as if the entire world had crumbled. I recall perfectly how the mood in our home changed entirely. My mother refused to leave the hospital. She even slept in a chair by Rachel's bed for 2 weeks straight. My father put his work on hold to stay there, his eyes inflamed from sleepless nights. I watched him cry for the first time in my life, a guy as powerful as my father who trembled whenever a doctor entered the room. At the moment, I recognized that she required their assistance. I was even pleased with myself for being mature enough to care for things without adding to their load. I got myself to school and completed my schoolwork on my own. My neighbors would say I was such a mature little boy. I never anticipated things to be the same after Rachel's recovery. She became the house's special girl. My mother would fear whenever she tripped, afraid she was still delicate. When Rachel's grades dipped, my father would say, "Don't push her. Her brain's still healing." Rachel learned to accept that role. She gradually found out how to take advantage of my parents' worry. If she didn't want to do chores, she could just remark, "My head hurts." If she needed something, she'd mention being sleepy. And my parents would always give it. I do not believe Rachel intended to manipulate them. She was just a kid who learnt to read rooms. But what concerned me was how my parents' attitudes toward me gradually shifted. If I requested fairness, they argued I lacked empathy. If I complained about partiality, they labeled me selfish and fortunate to be healthy. My mother always told me, "You should be grateful you didn't go through what your sister did." But there were times when, watching Rachel's boundless love, I secretly wished I was in that hospital bed instead. No one needed to remind me anymore. I knew where I stood in the family, as a typical youngster who did not require extra attention. And now your wish has come true. I was the one at the hospital. But I didn't see my parents beside my bedside, as they had for Rachel. Nobody stayed awake through the night. Nobody yelled out of dread. There was only one chilly, distant message. "Can't this wait? We're busy right now." That was when I realized the terrible truth. Being in the hospital does not garner you affection. Love has to be there already, waiting for an opportunity to manifest itself. To understand why my father's message hurt so much, I need to tell you about everything I gave up and contributed since I was 18. That year, my family was absolutely bankrupt. My father, Richard Bennett, had a modest transportation firm in Queens. However, the company failed due to a faulty investment in a failed logistics project, leaving us in debt for more than $600,000. I remember the night he sat at the kitchen table, his head buried in his hands, holding a bank foreclosure letter. His voice shook as he informed us, "We must move into a rental." I'm sorry, kids. Losing the house wasn't the most difficult aspect. It was seeing my father cry at a man I had always admired for his strength and unwavering resolve, suddenly sitting there like a broken man. My mother put a hand on his shoulder to console him, but I could see tears welling up in her eyes as well. We soon moved into a little rented apartment in the Bronx, and our entire lives transformed. My mother began working double shifts at a cleaning company to keep us afloat. My father spent his days applying for jobs, but his age and bankruptcy history resulted in one rejection after another. As for me, I resolved not to become another burden. Following graduation from high school, I was awarded a full scholarship to Baruch College. At the same time, I took on part-time jobs at a neighboring coffee shop, a Barnes & Noble bookstore, and teaching high school kids math on weekends. I worked approximately 40 hours each week and maintained a 3.8 GPA. Rachel did not apply for scholarships. She did not acquire a job. Instead, she enrolled in a community college with lesser tuition, but she still depended on our parents for everything, including tuition, meals, and new clothing. Despite the fact that finances were limited, my parents went above and above to help her. I remember telling her one dinner, "You should get a part-time job to help out." But before she could respond, my father cut in. "Rachel's health is still not fully stable after what she went through with meningitis. We can't push her too hard." Hearing him jump to her defense, Rachel gave a faint smile and said, "I'll look into it." But months passed, and she never did. And my parents continued to make excuses for her. After that night, I never mentioned it at the dinner table again. I graduated with a finance degree. Almost immediately, I got a position at Goldman Sachs with a starting salary of $80,000 a year, something most of my peers could only dream of. I had saved enough money to purchase my first condo on the Lower East Side. I didn't brag to anyone in my family. I was just quietly proud of what I had accomplished. My mother called in November, just before Christmas. She sounded exhausted. She replied, "Noah, the landlord just told us the rent is going up to $2,000 a month. We can't afford that. I don't know what we're going to do." Hearing it made my chest clench. Regardless of how unjust they had been to me, they were still my parents. I couldn't just sit back and watch them be forced into a rundown neighborhood because they couldn't afford rent. A week later, I decided to spend $300,000 from my money to buy them a tiny house in Astoria, Queens. It had one bedroom and a little garden in the back, which was enough to provide them with a secure living situation after years of suffering. My mother hugged me tightly the day I gave over the keys, saying, "Noah, I'm so proud of you. You're the best son I could ever ask for." At that point I smiled, convinced that all the hard years had been worthwhile. But that feeling only lasted 3 weeks. My mom called again on Thursday evening. This time her tone was cautious. She responded, "Noah, this house feels a bit small. Do you think you could get a bigger one so Rachel can move in with us? She just broke up with her boyfriend and needs family around her." I was stunned. Rachel worked full-time at a graphic design business and was financially secure enough to rent a place. I tried to remain calm, telling her, "Rachel can rent her apartment. She's an adult with an income." But my mother dismissed it. With a stronger tone, she answered, "Rachel only makes $50,000 a year, unlike you. And besides, she's a girl. She needs more protection." This made my blood boil. I said straight out, "I bought that house for you and Dad, not for it to become a shelter for Rachel. If you're unhappy, you can figure out another solution." There was silence for a few seconds. Then she replied in a mournful tone, "Noah, when did you become so selfish? Family is about love and sharing." And then I realized something painful. In my mother's perspective, anything I accomplished was only important if it benefited Rachel. Still, I let them stay in that house until the day I was laying in a hospital bed and received the message, "Can't this wait? We're busy right now." I eventually realized it was time to take back what was mine. Return to my story. I entered the office of Charles Harrison, one of Manhattan's most known attorneys. He was in his early 40s, with salt and pepper hair and piercing eyes under rimless spectacles. After hearing what I'd been through and my request, Mr. Harrison looked at me and asked in a calm, professional tone, "Mr. Bennett, are you sure about this decision? It's a significant and firm step to take against your own family." At that moment, I turned to gaze out the window. People on Madison Avenue went about their daily routines rapidly. Inside me, an emptiness expanded, as if I were standing outside of existence, seeing shards of happiness that I had never experienced. After a few seconds I returned to Mr. Harrison and stated, "I've made my decision. Please proceed with the paperwork." A legal notice was issued to my parents' Astoria, Queens home. I had requested Mr. Harrison to write a legal letter advising them that they needed to evacuate the property within 30 days. The reason was clear. The owner wanted to regain the land for personal usage. As soon as they received the letter, my parents began calling non-stop. The phone rang from morning until night, but I did not answer. They exchanged text messages. I removed them without reading. They even showed up at my Wall Street office building, but I had already informed security that personal visits would not be allowed on my floor. The same day my granddad called. His voice sounded concerned. "Noah, I know you're angry, but is there any chance you'd reconsider? They're still your parents." I quietly responded, "Grandpa, do you remember what you told me when I was hospitalized? You said, 'Not everyone who shares your blood is truly family.' I understand what that means now." He went silent for a long time. Finally he sighed and replied, "I understand, Noah. I worry about you." I thanked him for calling and hung up, knowing I had reached the point of no return. After being released from the hospital, I called Lily at the number that my grandfather had worked so hard to obtain for me. For the first time, I was scared about inviting a woman to dinner. It was not because I lacked experience, it was because Lily was unlike anyone I had ever met. Our first date happened at a modest bistro in Greenwich Village. I thought we'd stick to the typical topics: work, hobbies, and the weather. But Lily wasn't interested in small talk. She wanted to know about the deeper issues. She inquired about my family, how I felt while in the hospital, and what had been on my mind regarding things I had never uttered aloud to anyone. What shocked me the most was Lily's lack of judgment. When I told her about my family, she simply listened and nodded as if she understood. I saw neither pity or astonishment in her eyes. Simply true empathy. After that night we began seeing one another more frequently, generally in the evenings. And with each meeting I saw a new aspect of her. Lily was born and reared in Brooklyn as the youngest of 3 sisters. She had not become a nurse due to pressure from her family. She picked it because she actually cared about people. That explained why she went above and beyond for me in the hospital, and why her kindness never felt obligatory. Our connection progressed faster than either of us imagined. Lily became the only person I wanted to share everything with. More importantly, she was the first person to make me feel truly appreciated for who I was, rather than what I could contribute. In the days that followed, word went quickly around the Bennett household that I had kicked my parents out. My parents told their version of the story, in which I was the ungrateful son who heartlessly abandoned his aging parents. The first call came from Aunt Carol, my mother's younger sister. I was drinking coffee and reading the Wall Street Journal before leaving for work when my phone rang. When I picked up, she yelled into the line, enraged. "Noah Bennett, what the hell are you doing? Do you have any idea your mother's been crying for 3 days straight?" I felt a deep and familiar fatigue pour over me. Aunt Carol did not inquire as to what had happened. She went directly to the accusation. Coldly, I responded, "Do you even know what my father did while I was in the hospital?" There was a pause. Then with a shaky voice she added, "Well, you can't just throw your parents out of their home." That was when I realized that discussing anything would be worthless. I hung up after saying, "Aunt Carol, this was my decision. I'm not going to argue about it." Less than 2 hours later, my cousin Tyler called. His tone was hostile from the beginning. "Noah, I heard what happened. What you did was messed up. No one in this family would ever do something like that." My hands began to shake as rage rose within me. I managed to speak with clenched teeth. "Tyler, don't call me again." I hung up right then. I did not bother explaining. I knew nobody would believe me anyway. For the remainder of the week, my phone rang non-stop. Distant relatives I scarcely knew called to chastise me. Friends of my parents called to calm me down. Even others I had never spoken to called to voice their outrage. Despite the ringing phones, ranting, guilt-tripping and lectures, one thing remained constant. I stood by my decision. Then, around 10 days after I submitted the notice to my parents to leave the house, the big storm hit. I recall it clearly. It was an early weekday morning. I was in my office preparing for a client appointment when Megan, my assistant, knocked on the door with a troubled expression. She responded, "Mr. Bennett, would you mind checking Facebook for a moment? There's a post going around, and it's about you." I grabbed my phone and accessed the link Rachel had emailed me. What I saw caused my heart to stop. My sister Rachel had made a post in a Facebook group called Family Drama. The post had 4 photographs. The first image was of my parents packing their possessions, looking tired and exhausted. The second featured a little moving truck loaded with boxes. The third image showed my mother sitting on the floor, face buried in her hands, wailing. And the last photograph was of me, taken a few years ago. The caption hit me like a punch in the chest. Noah Bennett has officially kicked his elderly parents out of their home. The house they've lived in for the past 2 years is now just another tool he's using to punish them. Money can buy a house, but it can't buy a conscience. Hundreds of comments poured in beneath the post. OMG, who does that to their aging parents? This is exactly what's wrong with this ungrateful generation. People like this deserve to be boycotted. The world spun around me as I read through the deluge of fury. Megan glanced at me with concern. "Mr. Bennett, are you all right?" A few seconds later I gathered myself together and said, "Cancel all of my meetings today. I need time to deal with this." Rachel's post went viral, with over 5,000 shares in just hours. I received hundreds of messages from strangers via Messenger, most of them were packed with insults and hostility. And as I had anticipated, the following morning, Mr. Whitmore, the managing director of my division, summoned me to his office. He was in his mid-50s and had always admired me. When I walked in, he looked serious. He got right to the point. "Noah, I'm aware of what's happening with your family. Normally the company doesn't get involved in personal matters." My heart started to race. I knew what was coming. After a moment's pause he continued. "But this has started to affect the firm's reputation. We've received hundreds of calls from clients asking about you. Some have even said they don't want to work with a company that employs someone. So cruel." It felt like someone slapped me in the face. My voice quivered as I said, "Are you firing me?" Mr. Whitmore sighed and said, "No, Noah, you're a valuable employee. but I need you to take a paid leave of absence until things settle down. I hope you understand." I understood what he was saying despite his conciliatory tone. "My career has recently suffered a significant knock." I said calmly, "I understand, Mr. Whitmore, I'll take the leave." Then I exited his office. Later that day, when I saw the formal HR email confirming my leave of absence, I felt like an absolute failure. That afternoon, after leaving the office, I found myself again sitting across from attorney Charles Harrison. This time, a large folder was placed on the table. Inside were printed copies of Rachel's post, the hateful comments that followed, and, most crucially, my company's email putting me on leave. After evaluating everything, Mr. Harrison spoke in his normal professional manner. "Mr. Bennett, based on the evidence you've provided, we have a strong legal case to file a defamation lawsuit against Rachel Bennett for slander and damages to your reputation and financial standing." I had a moment of hesitation. After all, Rachel was still my sister. But then I remembered the barrage of harsh comments in the family drama group concerning the impact on my professional image. The customers lost. What a shame. The silence of those who were supposed to support me. A few seconds later, with determination in my voice, I stated, "Mr. Harrison, let's move forward. File the lawsuit." After leaving Harrison's office that day, I began my second response phase. I shared my first piece of proof, a screenshot of my father's text message from the day I was laying in a hospital bed, waiting for him to come in and sign the operation consent paperwork. The message was basic. "Can't this wait? We're busy right now." I did not write a caption. I did not explain. I included the screenshot directly beneath Rachel's original post. Then I shared it on my profile and reposted it in the family drama group in case she decided to delete her own. Almost quickly, public opinion divided. Some people began to defend me, saying things like, "If that's how the parents treated him when he was in the hospital, how can you blame him?" Others, particularly when Rachel claimed the text was manufactured, began to criticize me, labeling me ungrateful and a liar attempting to clean up his reputation. However, I no longer cared about their thoughts. After the lawsuit was finally filed in court, I obtained a certified copy from Mr. Harrison. Then I wrote it as a follow-up to my original message, plain and direct, stating that I would not back down. I was prepared to see this through until the conclusion. My mother called me. It was the first time she had called me after the disaster. She had already moved out of the house I had purchased for them in Astoria. I could hear her shaky voice as I answered. "Noah, can we talk?" she inquired. A searing pain struck me in the chest. Her voice sounded older and more delicate than I remember. I responded in a chilly tone, "What do you want to say?" Almost pleading, she added, "Noah, I know I made mistakes, but could you please drop the lawsuit against Rachel?" When she said those words, I felt a surge of rage like dry kindling catching fire. My blood beat and my heart raced. "Did you ever stop to think about what my life might become because of what she said?" I questioned in a steady but firm voice. She was silent. The line remained still, as if the air had frozen. She then remarked, hardly holding back tears, "She's still your sister, Noah. Family taking each other to court. It just isn't right." It felt like someone had driven a knife into my chest. Despite everything, she still cared exclusively about Rachel. With my throat tight and my voice shrill, I continued, "I'm not dropping the case. My family died a month ago, and now you all have to deal with the consequences." For the first time, I hung up on my mother. I didn't feel any regret. Not for 1 second. On Saturday night, I was sitting in the living room reading when the doorbell rang. It was approximately 8 p.m. Not exactly when I would anticipate visitors. When I opened the door, I froze. Rachel, my mother, and my father all stood in front of me. Rachel spoke first, her voice shaking. "Noah, I know I was wrong. Please, I'm begging you to drop the lawsuit." I gazed at her before turning to face our parents who were standing behind her. My father appeared years older. His hair had totally grayed, and his back was bent. My mother seemed thinner, her face depressed, as if she had been ill for some time. Rachel sobbed. "I'll lose my job if you don't drop the lawsuit. My husband's already talking about divorce. I'll lose everything." Hearing that, something twisted in my chest. She was still my sister after all. But then I remembered how it felt to be in that hospital bed alone and helpless. I remembered the outpourings of anger on social media. I recall witnessing my career unravel due to a lie. In a chilly tone, I asked, "Rachel, do you remember how no one came to see me when I was in the hospital? Do you know what it felt like to read that message from Dad?" Rachel said nothing. She kept her head lowered. My parents stood behind her, silent. After approximately a minute, my mother walked forward. Her voice was imploring. "Noah, please drop the lawsuit. I promise we'll make it up to you. I'll do anything you ask." When I heard that, I felt a strong sense of fatigue. I said quietly, "Mom, there are things you can't make up for. Reputation, trust, and dignity are almost impossible to return once they're gone. And real love doesn't come from obligation. So please, don't talk to me about making it up." I then turned to Rachel, who was still staring at the floor, and stated, "No one came for me when I was in the hospital, and now I can't be the one to come and save anyone." With that, I returned inside and closed the door. Through the glass, I noticed them standing there for a while. They finally turned and walked away. The Manhattan court heard my case against Rachel. The trial lasted 3 days and featured various family members and acquaintances in court. Attorney Charles Harrison had meticulously prepared his case. He explained piece by piece how Rachel's Facebook post had harmed my professional reputation and career. Lily sat in the row designated for my support, her hand firmly clutching mine whenever tension rose in the room. Her presence was my anchor, the most powerful source of strength during those awful court days. On the first day, Mr. Harrison forwarded my father's text message to the one he sent while I was in the hospital. When it was read aloud in court, I witnessed numerous individuals shaking their heads and plainly upset. On the second day, expert witnesses in media and reputation management took the stand. They talked about how Rachel's post went viral and how that exposure affected my public image. According to Dr. Collins, a social media expert, this post was shared over 5,000 times and generated thousands of negative comments. The damage to the plaintiff's reputation is both severe and long-lasting. On the third day, Rachel finally admitted complete responsibility. With a shaky voice, she told the court, "I admit I didn't take the time to understand the full situation before posting. I let my emotions take over and caused serious harm to my brother." When the judge inquired if she had intended to destroy my reputation, Rachel responded, "No, Your Honor, but I understand that intent does not excuse the consequences." After 3 days of testimony, the jury just required 2 hours to reach a decision. Judge Whitman, a severe guy in his mid-50s, announced the verdict aloud. Rachel was required to issue a public apology on all social media platforms where the original message was disseminated. She was also forced to pay $20,000 in emotional damages and $45,000 in professional losses as a result of my 3-month suspension from work, for a total of $65,000 due within 60 days. As the decision was read, I noticed Rachel drop into her seat, her face pallid. Her husband Evan sat beside her in silence. My folks were speechless. Lily gripped my hand, whispering, "It's over now." Rachel posted her court-mandated apologies the day following the ruling. She wrote, "I was wrong to post false information about my brother, Noah Bennett. I apologize for the damage caused to his reputation and career. I've learned that truth matters more than emotion." But the apologies arrived too late. Rachel's design studio terminated her contract as soon as the verdict was announced. Evan filed for divorce shortly after, citing extreme stress and financial difficulties. I did not feel victorious as I saw Rachel's life fall apart. I did not feel fulfilled. I had an overpowering sense of emptiness, as if I had just won a battle that no one wanted to fight. My life has regained its rhythm. Following the lawsuit, Mr. Whitmore promoted me to vice president. He spoke to me. "Noah, how you handled that crisis shows the composure of a real leader. I have no idea where my parents or Rachel are living right now. My life is now allocated exclusively for those who genuinely matter. My grandfather Henry is the person I talk to the most. On weekends, Lily and I usually go see him in Brooklyn. He's always excited to see us, especially now that Lily is pregnant with our first kid. Lily and I got married in a tiny, intimate ceremony. Only her family and my grandfather were present. My parents and Rachel were not invited, but I did not feel left out. It was the happiest day of my life. Lily is 6 months along. Every night I place my palm on her abdomen and feel our baby girl's small kicks. We already know her name, Grace. I've since rented out my parents' old Astoria house for $2,000 per month. Every penny goes to a fund for Grace's future education. I am not posting this story to complain. And I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm telling you this because I know there are individuals like me who have wasted years believing that if they simply worked hard enough, were decent enough, and provided enough, their family would love them back. Eventually, they realize their worth. But the truth is that not all families are worth your commitment. If you are listening to this and feel like you are the only one left behind, please know that you are not alone. And you're not wrong for walking away. Before I complete the story, I'd like to ask you who has been with me through every word, memory, and moment. Was it immoral of me to ask my parents to leave the home I had purchased with my own hands? Was I wrong to take my sister to court to defend the truth and my reputation? Please share your opinions in the comments. I would love to hear your tale. If you've experienced unpleasant family boundaries and any of this resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I will continue to share family tales and create boundaries, not to exclude others, but to protect myself. Thank you very much for listening. And if you're in the heart of a storm right now, realize that you're not alone. I wish you peace today and every day.